Hi, I'm Dr. Jalen Ricks. When people ask me what I do for a living, and I tell them that I'm a sexologist, oftentimes I get asked questions like, how or why did I become a sexologist? And I have to admit, it starts with dancing in church. Now, it may not be exactly what you imagine. I grew up in one of those churches that's much like the church in the movie Footloose, where the town, little small town, had a law against dancing. Well, at least in my church, it was a big, big sin. But when I entered youth group, we had a brand new youth pastor that wanted to push the envelope, who wanted to do a youth musical in which we would have choreography. Yeah, and you know, it actually was choreography of the most basic nature. More like marching band, really. The guys would be on one side, the girls would be on the other, and then in the next song, the guys would be on the other side, and the girls would be on one side. And in one song, he wanted to have the guys move down to the front of the stage in the middle of the song. Scandalous, I know. So the music was going, we were singing, and at some point we were to take 1, 2, 3, 4 steps down to the front. And then everything stopped. Everything stopped. The director stopped the music, stopped the singing, and he said, okay, we're going to do this again, but this time could we have a little less swish? And I was thinking, swish, swish, what does he mean by? And about that moment, I realized every eye in the room was on me, And now we're doing it again, and I don't even know what I did. And I'm kind of panicking, but the music starts and the singing starts, and we get to that part, and I think I kind of did a robot Frankenstein down to the front of the room because I didn't know what I'd done wrong. Well, you know, I can look back on that now after a lot of therapy, and I can chuckle about that experience. But as a kid, 13 years old, this experience was devastating. It was huge. And I think it's because, for the most part, it was probably the first time I ever really felt shame. So it wasn't just a matter of me making the wrong steps. And it wasn't so much about choreography, because I can tell you, in the privacy of my room, with my own music going, I could do all kinds of swishy dancing. This was about something deeper. I was coming to grips with my gay sexuality. And I was learning by experience that who I was on the inside, who I really was, could create condemnation, could create name-calling, could create rejection. And so that experience, as well as others, taught me that who I really was didn't matter. I should shove that away. I should hide it away. And I should be on the outside the best straight Christian boy I could ever be. And even when I went into college, I privately went and became a part of an ex-gay ministry. And this was a place that would promise and taught us that if we followed their program and we did what they said, we would in fact be able to make the leap to heterosexuality. But I gotta tell you, after a while, I wasn't seeing a whole lot of change. There was even, there would be times they would do all kinds of things like have softball games and sports for the guys to kind of generate their masculinity, or have makeovers for the women so they would feel more feminine. But in reality, I wasn't seeing anybody become more straight. In fact, there were people working the program for years, and they still seemed pretty gay. In fact, a leader would get up in front and show people how Jesus had healed him, and he'd get in front of churches and ask for money for the ministry. But in private, he would confide with us that he had to fantasize about men to please his wife in bed. That didn't sound too straight to me. So I went to them and I asked them, what can I do? I'm feeling like a failure. I don't know what else to do. And they said, maybe you should pray more. Maybe you should go to church more. Maybe you should memorize more scripture. They would say, maybe you should visualize what it's going to be like someday when you're a straight person, when Jesus heals you. And I would pray and I would fantasize for hours what it would be like for me to lift this burden of shame off of me, and what it would be like to please my family and my friends by being the best straight Christian ever. Well, as you can imagine, I still didn't see a lot of change. And especially when I started seeing the people around me, a couple of people that were working the program attempt suicide because they were not seeing any change either. So I gotta admit that I understand not everybody can relate to being gay. That's okay. But most of us can relate to what it feels like to feel deep shame. It's that experience when you feel, if people knew who you were on the inside, who you authentically were, they would just reject you. So luckily, I realized that if I was going to understand this sexuality thing, I needed to consume all the research that was out there. Not just what the church told me, not just what the ex-gay group told me, but all of it. And I'm happy to say I discovered there was a whole field of study called sexology. And that there were a few basic concepts that when put into practice, when put into your life, it brings about a healthy sexuality. Whether you're in a relationship, whether you're in relationship with yourself, it brings about a balanced and healthy, responsibly enjoyed sexuality. And it really didn't matter whether I was gay or straight, whether there was lesbian or transgendered. It was about creating balance in your life that brought about a healthy sexuality. Now, one of those basic ideas that I learned was that there's one thing that's probably more corrosive to healthy sexuality than anything else. And guess what it is? Shame. And I was so surprised because I had only thought that shame and sexuality went together. I didn't know I could have one without the other. So I went about ridding my life of all the shame I could find. I did everything I could. I went to therapy. It was a lot of work. It took me quite a bit of time. I learned to do personal work. I learned what it meant to love myself unconditionally. And I have to admit, there would be times, there have been times over the past few years when I will kind of do that future talk thing, right? I will go, oh, someday I'm going to, and I realize I am the person I have always wanted to be. I feel fulfilled and I feel wonderful in having an abundant life. I have learned to love myself unconditionally and love others that way too. I realize that what's on the inside is congruent with what's on the outside. And I have a whole spiritual community that loves me for who I am. And I spend whole seasons of my life with as little shame as possible. This is the kind of pleasure I want to live in all the time. And it's why I've become a sexologist, to help others embrace their sexuality in its fullness, in balance with the rest of their lives. And it's also why I believe the world would be a better place if we all had the opportunity for a happy and healthy sex life. Thanks for listening.